Yeah, from 99. He's in the industrial area. Looks like he's on a pavement. Stand by.
Hello people and sheeple. PINACI news. Right then. Lots of people in the past have asked me, can you physically defend yourself against the police? And the answer is yes and no, because it all depends on the situation, one of which News Now Yorkshire was involved in a little while ago. So I'll play you that short clip now as a little example, and then I'm going to read out some case law.
Why?
Just because you're taking photos at the police station, that's all. I just want to know what.
Is that a problem?
What are we up to?
What are you up to?
Well, I've come out to ask you.
Why are you standing so close to me?
It's alright, calm down.
No, you calm down, get back.
What are you being so hostile about?
Why are you being so hostile? Why are you getting so close
So
to me?
the reason why we've come out is because you're taking...
No, unless you move out of the way, we're not
No.
we're not having this conversation.
The reason why
You
we've
step
come...
back or we're not having this conversation.
The reason why I've come
You
out...
step back or we're not having the conversation.
Don't start shouting.
No, you go away from me.
Don't start shouting.
Get out of my
Right.
face.
The
Move
reason-
back or we're not having the conversation.
No.
Move back or we're not
The
having the
reason why
conversation.
we're having this conversation...
We're not having this conversation
because
unless you
you've
move
been out
back.
taking pictures of police
We're not having this
vehicles
conversation unless you move back.
and personal vehicles.
We're not having this conversation unless you move back. Now move
Why
back
do you
out my
need to
space.
take photos of
Come over here
police
then.
Move back out my space. Now
Come
you
over here.
really... Why are you pushing me? Get your hands off me. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that?
Calm down.
Don't grab me.
I didn't grab me. You grabbed me.
Yeah, good.
There's no...
Right.
A couple of years ago I made a video in response to one of those Channel 5 police propaganda videos called Code Zero, Officer Under Attack, where my video was called Code Zero, Public Under Attack. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to watch that video. Basically, what this police propaganda TV programme is about is police officers being assaulted by members of the public on a regular basis. And they will tell you that a police officer is attacked every 20 minutes in the UK, but then use video captured by members of the public, all their body cameras, from years and years and years ago, some of it going back 10, 15 years, because they want to use the most dramatic images they can. Because, in my opinion, most of the assaults on police in this country are for literally just touching a police officer when he's trying to arrest you or move you somewhere, which is why they don't have any up-to-date footage to use in their latest TV propaganda programme to show you police being assaulted on a regular basis. So what really happens when the police report an assault on them is what you see in News Now Yorkshire's video of him being arrested for assaulting an emergency worker, when really all he was doing was defending himself from being assaulted by the police officer, which he is entitled to do if the officer wasn't acting in the lawful course of his duty. Collins v Wilcock, High Court. The facts were, the defendant was on the street with her friend. Both were known by the police to be prostitutes. An officer approached the two women suspecting that they were soliciting. The friend agreed to be questioned, but the defendant walked away. The police officer took hold of her arm to stop her from leaving, at which point the defendant swore and scratched at the officer. The defendant was convicted of assaulting a police officer in the course of duty, but the defendant argued that she was not guilty of this offence because the officer had not been acting in the lawful course of her duties. Issues. Was the officer acting in the lawful course of her duty? Decision. The court held for the defendant and quashed a conviction. The officer had not been acting in the lawful exercise of her duty, as they had no legal power to touch the defendant in these circumstances. In fact, the officer had committed a battery against the defendant, which in my opinion is what's just happened to News Now Yorkshire. The general definition for assault and battery is: an assault is an act which causes another person to apprehend the infliction of immediate unlawful force on his person, and a battery is the actual infliction of unlawful force on another person. People are taken to implicitly consent to contact, which is a reasonable, generally accepted and expected part of normal life. Goff L.J. gave the examples of jostling through a crowd or touching a person to get their attention. Restraint is not normally acceptable, however, and will constitute battery. So, a police officer is not entitled to detain or restrain a person unless they are using one of their common law or statutory powers of arrest or stop and search powers. Anything other than that constitutes battery by the police officer. Let's also look at Wood versus Director of Public Prosecutions, where the defendant challenged his conviction for obstructing a police officer and threatening behaviour. The officer had taken hold of him to restrain him, not intending to arrest him, but only to establish whether he was a person they were looking for. He then struggled to escape and was arrested. At court, the appeal succeeded because, at the time he stopped the appellant, the officer had no power of arrest, and what happened in court was his barrister cited Ludlow and others versus Burgess, 1972, where a police officer has no more right to lay hands on someone than any other member of the community. The person so restrained is entitled to use reasonable force to free himself. So the answer is yes, you can defend yourself against a police officer who isn't acting in the lawful course of their duty. So if you're not under arrest or being stopped and searched, and a police officer grabs a hold of you, you are entitled to use reasonable force to stop the assault and battery. But as soon as you hear that police officer say, right, you're under arrest, then I suggest you stop using any reasonable force and take the arrest and then sort it out later, because otherwise that might constitute assault on an emergency worker, and I guarantee you'll get battered, panther sprayed and tasered, whether it be justified or not.
And he's gone right at the end there.
He's headed towards Sainsbury's.
Put that camera down, or we will tase you.
990.